need for a industrial working class is gradually fading away. They don't need workers at the assembly line any longer. And as a result, the living standard of people in the Western countries is decreasing because they don't need at home an aristocracy of labor, a class of well-paid, middle-class, comfortable factory workers, industrial workers at home. They don't need it anymore. There is no need for millions of Americans to live a comfortable life working the assembly line, right? The steel mills, the coal mines, all of that, they're gradually looking to eliminate all of that. Anything that can be done, by a machine, pretty soon it will be a machine. It will be done by a machine. And the only thing that human beings will have left is our humanity. Jack Ma, the tech billionaire in China, talks a lot about this, right? For years, the entire educational system, the way we bring up children, has all been about getting people to work more like machines, getting people to function less like human beings and more like machines. But now, anything that requires machine-like behavior is going to be done by a machine. We've got machines that can play chess better than humans can. We've got machines that can bookkeep better than humans can. We've got machines that can invest stocks better than humans can. So if it requires a machine-like mentality, a machine heart with a machine mind, right? That's Charlie Chaplin. But anything that requires machine-like functioning can be done by a machine. And so the entire way that we bring up children, the entire way we've trained the mind to operate, that entire method of operating in the world, we're at the point, lo and behold, we're going to have to rethink all of that. We're going to have to rethink the relationship of human beings. For a long time, human beings functioned, as Karl Marx called them in his book Capital, basically as appendages to machines. That's in Karl Marx's Capital. He talks about how the worker is an appendage to a machine. Well, now we are at the point where machines do not need human appendages any longer. The proletariat as a class is being eliminated. They don't need industrial workers anymore. Workers no longer play a role in production. And so you're going to have millions of people who are outcast and starving. Millions of people who have no place in the global assembly line. And that is going to totally change everything. We are on the brink of a great social revolution. Right? First, there is an economic revolution. Next, there is a social revolution. And third, there is a political revolution. And we are in the early stages of a economic revolution, where a new mode of production without workers, without factory workers, without workers involved in production, machines without appendages, is moving in to take over. This is the end game of what Marx described in Capital, as workers compete with machines, as capitalists constantly drive to make the means of production more efficient, to reduce the role of labor, to make the worker more easily replaceable, to pay the worker less and less, to involve the worker less and less, and at the same time to churn out more and more and more products than ever before, to fill the market with more and more products than ever before, more cheaply produced, and then to face the great catastrophe that results from that. Lo and behold, as you eliminate labor, as you drive the value of the worker down, the worker is also the consumer. And the consumer can never buy back the product that he has driven so hard to produce. And as you cast out millions of workers from the means of production, the ability to buy these huge numbers of products, of iPhones, of iPads, of shoes, of smartphones, of antennas, of books, of socks, of shirts, the ability of workers to buy decreases. And you have a huge glut of overproduction. Right? Now, people will think back to the financial crisis of 2008. And what do they tell you about the financial crisis of 2008? The housing bubble burst. Remember that? The housing bubble burst. People, all of a sudden, were getting their homes foreclosed on because they couldn't afford to pay back the loans they had used to buy their houses. That's what happened. The housing bubble burst. And if you're a liberal, you then blame that on Alan Greenspan. Alan Greenspan legalized all kinds of lending that had previously been illegal. So people who couldn't, got these predatory loans, and they couldn't afford to buy back, to pay them off, and they lost their homes. That's the liberal narrative. The right-wing narrative is, oh, the government has these anti-discrimination laws, and they forced companies to lend money to poor people who couldn't afford it. Oh, it was awful. Well, they're both wrong. The housing bubble burst for this reason. Americans couldn't afford to buy homes anymore. The standard of living of people in the United States has gone down so significantly, has dropped, has been going down significantly. Wages have been decreasing, right? The rate of debt has been increasing. The overall living standards, people's savings have been decreasing. The Americans, throughout the Bush years, just continued to see this steady decline in their standard of living. And so Alan Greenspan was sitting there in the Federal Reserve trying to figure out how he could keep Americans spending. And he legalized all kinds of credit card lending that had previously been illegal. And he legalized mortgage lending practices that had also previously been illegal. Why? Was it because, it was... No, the reason he did it was very simple. He needed Americans to keep buying houses. Think about how much of the U.S. economy involves new houses being constructed and people buying them, right? You've got the lumber industry, you got the steel industry, you got construction workers, you got lawn care. I mean, it is huge, right? If you think of all the money that is involved in people buying houses and new houses being constructed, houses being remodeled, houses being built, that's huge. And so, in order to keep the U.S. economy moving ahead, Alan Greenspan had to keep Americans buying houses. But Americans couldn't afford to keep buying houses. So, Alan Greenspan made it legal for them to get loans so they could keep buying houses even when they couldn't afford them. And that, lo and behold, it worked out for a little while, right? For a while it worked out. And then pretty soon, though, when these people don't pay back the loans that they get, then you get banks that fall and collapse and fail. That's what happened. And then you had the Obama administration come in with Dodd-Frank and try to impose some of those regulations once again. But now we've got the Trump administration coming in and ripping up regulations and cutting regulations and decreasing regulations. And lo and behold, people are getting, people are getting loans and it's happening again. And, people talk about there's another bubble that's waiting to burst, and that's the student debt bubble, right? Again, Americans, in order to go to college, young people are getting loans to go to college. However, their ability to get a good-paying job when they get out of college, a job that will enable them to pay back that loan, not exactly what it once was. So yes, if your young person goes to college, they graduate, and then they end up working at Starbucks with their degree in philosophy or political science or, astronomy or geography or whatever, if they end up then working at Starbucks, lo and behold, they're not going to be able to pay back the $100,000, and they're going to start defaulting. And then those banks that put up that money are not going to get the money. And pretty soon, you're going to have a debt bubble burst. And let me add, the student loan market is particularly interesting because you can never declare bankruptcy on a student loan. Never, right? You get a student loan, it will hang over your head for the rest of your life. It never goes away, right? Can't go away. So, add to that, now, all these millennials, all these, young people with these big student loans now, lo and behold, they're going to have to go and buy a home at some point, right? Wife and kids go and buy a home. Do you think you can buy a home? You think you can get a mortgage to buy a home if you owe hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt? If you owe tens of thousands of dollars in student debt, do you think you can go buy a home? No. No, you cannot. No, you cannot. So, I think that housing bubble might burst once again. We've got a lot hanging over our heads. The U.S. economy at this point is based on debt. All the growth we are seeing is debt-based economic growth. The rate of household debt in the United States is the highest it has ever been and has continued to rise. Trump says the economy is going up. It is. Spending is somewhat increasing, but it's all based on debt. Actual income is not increasing. Actual living standards is not increasing. Wages are barely going up. They've gone up just a tiny amount. The U.S. public is getting poorer and poorer and poorer. That's the problem here. And they're getting poorer because of the problem of overproduction, of the fact that the reason you had that post-war American dream, that white picket fence and that, that nice house and all of that. The reason you had that was because at that point, imperialism, the global system of monopoly capitalism, needed a strata of well-paid industrial workers in the homeland. And at this point, they don't need that anymore. They don't need you at the steel mill. They don't need you in the coal mine. They don't need you in the auto plant. They don't need you. They don't need you in the global apparatus of production at this point. They don't need you, right? They've got artificial intelligence that can do it. It's not just offshoring. Offshoring is a minor factor. I mean, it's a factor, sure, when they ship jobs overseas, but the biggest factor is automation. They don't need you in the means of production anymore. They don't need you as an appendage to a machine. And because of that, they don't need to let you have the lifestyle that they once gave you. They don't need you to have the living standards that you once had. That's the issue, right? They are eliminating the labor aristocracy because they don't need it anymore. The standard of living is going down, and as a result, we all can't afford to buy houses. We can't afford to pay for college. We can't afford to do all these things that we once were able to do. And the bosses want us to keep spending, but they don't want to pay us the money. That's what's going on here. The rulers of the United States, the billionaires and bankers that run the United States, they want us all to keep spending money, but they don't want to pay us for doing it, right? They don't want to pay us for our labor. They want to remove us from the apparatus of production. They want to eliminate jobs, but at the same time, they want us to keep buying, and you can't have it both ways. People with money spend money. People without money can't spend money. And the more you invent ways for people without money to spend money, it only works for a little while longer, right? Thomas Jefferson very famously said, "Do not spend money that you do not have." Well, Thomas Jefferson, his advice has not been followed by the U.S. government in about 100 years. The U.S. government is spending lots of money it doesn't have. The U.S. public is being constantly pushed to spend money it does not have. We're at the point, there was a survey that the overwhelming majority of Americans could not afford a $400 emergency. $400 emergency. When you have a public that cannot afford a $400 emergency, they don't have $400 in the bank, they don't have $400 they can call up a relative and say, "I'm desperate, I need $400, I'll get it back to you." The overwhelming majority of the U.S. public cannot afford a $400 emergency. How in the world can you say that we have a booming economy, right? Well, GDP is rising, we're headed for another crisis of overproduction because the problems are systemic. And I do apologize. Kinky says I'm sounding pretty bleak. I'm not trying to be bleak here. I'm telling you that there is a necessity that we get beyond the capitalist mode of production. When you have production for profits, not for rational use, not for sane reasons, when the economy is functioning only to make a profit for a few, it's going to be functioning in an erratic, irrational way that's going to result in cyclical crises of overproduction. John Maynard Keynes didn't want to be a Marxist, so he called it underconsumption. But this is the reality that we're living in. This is the Götterdämmerung, the end game of what Marx predicted in his book Capital. That's what we're living in right now. And you'll notice that Russia and China continue to rise. And why do they rise? Because their economy is controlled by the state, not profit. The state controls the apparatus of production. There are central planners, and the central planners tell the private sector and the public sector what to do. And so as a result, the economies can continue to grow because they're not operating on the basis of the irrational profit motive. And that's the difference. When you have an economy based on profits, you're going to have a mess. But when you have a government of action that controls the centers of economic power and ensures that things get produced, when you have that, overall, at that point, you can continue to see growth. That in order to ensure the continued economic growth, you need a rationally planned economy. The private sector and the public sector must be controlled by society. The means of production, the major centers of economic power, must operate on the basis of public good, not profits. The state must control the means of production. Society as a whole must control the major centers of economic power. The economy must function according to rational reason and central planning, not the profit interests of a wealthy few. That's socialism, right? And you can say, well, that's not the utopia that I want, Caleb. I want this glorious, beautiful thing. I do too, right? We all want the best possible world. But I'm telling you that the difference between capitalism and socialism is that in capitalism, profits are in command. In capitalism, you don't have houses because people need to live in them. You have houses so landlords and bankers can make money off of them. You don't have food so people can eat it. You have food so that agribusiness and big box stores and all kinds of people can make money off of it. Capitalism is a system in which production and all economic activity is carried out for the purpose of making profits for a small group of owners. Socialism is a system in which the state and society at large dictate production based on rational central planning and interests. That's the difference between capitalism and socialism. And right now, socialism is continuing to rise, and capitalism is getting more and more irrational because the computer revolution is throwing a monkey wrench in the works of capitalism like you wouldn't believe. Capitalism works because you have these people called workers, and they go to their factory, and they're paid by their boss to participate in production, and at the end of the day, they get their paycheck, and they go and they buy some of the products that they and other workers produce. And it always has, problems, cyclical crises. They can never fully buy back everything they produce, or else their boss wouldn't make a profit, right? But at the end of the day, aside from the boom-bust cycle, as long as you've got factory workers, you can make the capitalist system function for the most part. Well, now, you've got capitalism, you've got the means of production privately operating to make profits for a small group of owners without any workers. That's what we've got right now. Marx never predicted this in Capital. He talked about, the increasing poverty of the workers. He never predicted capitalism without workers. That's what we have now. We have capitalism without the proletariat. We've got capitalist production without workers. That's what they're moving toward. And you can't do it because somebody has to buy the products. Because the overwhelming majority of humanity are not capitalists. And if they're not capitalists, they have to be workers. And if they're not workers, where do they fit into this economy? And if they don't fit into this economy, how can they survive? And that's why you've got John Podesta talking, lo and behold, about overpopulation. Overpopulate. There are too many people in the world. Oh my God, there's just too many people in the world. That's what they're saying. And as far as they're concerned, yeah, there are too many people, right? They don't want to spend all the money to take care of all these people, and they can't make a profit off of exploiting their labor anymore. They don't need them any longer. That's the situation we're in. So just like Robert Thomas Malthus and the old feudal order thought that at the time of the French Revolution, look, there's just too many people, right? The French, they were just breeding like crazy, and there's all these extra people, so of course you had a revolution. Can't be the old feudal system, can't be the way things were set up. Oh no, there's just too many of those poor French peasants, and they're pouring into the cities. There you go. The obsession by Bill Gates and Silicon Valley with overpopulation is based on a realization that they are moving toward a workerless economy. That's what that's about. That's why they are obsessing with overpopulation. Because they know they don't have room for workers at the assembly line anymore. There are going to be millions of people that are expendable. And as artificial intelligence takes off, every day more and more people are becoming expendable and useless, right? To a capitalist, you are a number. They look at you and they see a financial calculation. How much money can I make off of this person? That's what they see. How much money can I make off of this person? And for millions of people in the world, that number is going to be zero pretty soon. And when that number is zero, they have no interest in maintaining your existence. The talk of overpopulation, the talk of eugenics, which is, they always accuse, there's the synthetic, pseudo-left. You're right, they're muddled in this, but it's coming out of, I would say the alt-right forces talk about it more than anybody else, right? I mean, the Richard Spencer types are always talking about eugenics and superior races and breeding people and all of that. It's everywhere, and it's being filtered into the political establishment. On the pseudo-left, they're saying, the problem is there's too many people in the world, and we all ought to be poorer, and poverty is great because you're not hurting the environment. On the right, the alt-right wing, they're talking about these useless people with inferior intelligence and race science and all this, and the bell curve and all of that. Lo and behold, right, they're talking their way out of the crisis, the capitalist way out of the crisis. The capitalist attempts to liquidate the crisis, as William Z. Foster talks about in his 1932 book describing the Great Depression in the United States. The capitalist attempts to liquidate the crisis are mass destruction and death. They need basically to eliminate those that they have no way of making profits from. That's what they're thinking about. And This concept, there's all this talk of fascism right now, and I hate to be repetitive, but you need to know this. The basis of fascism, the basis of genocide, the basis of mass murder is the belief that you can't have growth. That's the basis. If you believe that the pie is only this big, right? The pie is only this big, right? The pie can only be this big. The pie cannot get any bigger. It can get smaller, but it can't get bigger. The pie is only this big. If the pie is only a certain size, the only way that you can increase your slice of the pie is by cutting into somebody else's slice of the pie, right? Because the pie is only this big. If you believe the pie is only this big, it never gets any bigger, the only way that you can get a bigger slice of the pie is by cutting into the slice of someone else. And everyone wants a bigger slice of the pie. This is human beings. We want to make a better life for our kids. We want our kids to be better off than we are. We want a better life. We want things in our life to improve, right? You get to a certain point in your life, you want more than what you had before. That's just natural. But if the pie is only this big, can't get any bigger, in a no-growth situation, the only way that you can get a bigger slice of the pie for yourself is by cutting into the slice of the pie of somebody else. And they're setting it up, right? One group of people says, you know what? I want a bigger slice of the pie, and this group over here, this other race, this other nationality, this other region, this other religion, they need to have a smaller slice of the pie because they don't work as hard as I do, or they're inferior to me, or whatever. And so they're set up, and they're going to, one section of society starts to say that they want to cut into what the other section says. And the other section says, no, actually, I should have a bigger slice of the pie. I should have a bigger slice of the pie. So then they want to cut into the other section. They talk about whipsawing, right? The old whipsaw, right? Just you cut a log with two guys, and when one guy's pushing, the other guy's pulling. And when the other guy's pulling, the other guy's pushing. That's what the capitalists do in a time of crisis. They whipsaw the population. Pull from one, give to the other. Pull from one, give to the other. Push, pull, one section of society beating down and terrorizing another section of society. That's what they envision right now. That's their way out of the crisis. Reduction of the population, reduction of living standards, and different constituencies, different regions, different nationalities, different religions, different backgrounds, different political groupings, different constituencies, different races, different religions, all fighting against each other, demanding that they be the ones who don't take the cut and the other guy take the cut. But the way out is growth. The way out is saying, no, we need the banks, factories, and industries, the major centers of economic power, to operate in a rational way so that the pie can expand. Right? That's the way out. When the understanding is that the pie can expand, the pie can get bigger, then you can get a bigger slice for yourself without cutting into somebody else. When you can have a centrally planned economy, when the banks, factories, and industries, when the centers of economic power function in a rational way, right? At that point, you don't need different sections of society beating each other down. You don't need one section of society beating down another section of society, all competing. My slice should be bigger. No, your slice should be bigger. No. At that point, when the economy is functioning in a rational way and growth is unlimited and the pie keeps getting bigger